Hello everyone, it's Maha. Thank you so much for joining me once again for Tarot and Astrology. So this is a continuation of my series, and in this video we're going to be looking at the mutable signs, which are Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces. So first of all, before I start, I wanted to just thank you so much for your patience and in giving me time to gather all the resources that I needed for this video. And I'm really excited to present this material for you. And again, as always, I wanted to just mention here that this particular journey of discovery for me personally is constantly and continuously evolving and growing. And by sharing my experiences with you and receiving your thoughts and your comments, that's another way that I learn, adds to my knowledge as well. So just feel free to add anything in the comment section you like, because your contribution really adds to my experience as well. And we're all learning together. I do not want to claim that I am the authority of this. This is just my experience, my passion, and I just love to share it with you. And I'm so happy and grateful that you are here to share it with me. So again, remember that this is a series and this is a continuation. So whatever I'm going to be talking about in this particular video, I'm just assuming that you have already watched the previous videos and you have an idea of what we've already covered so far. So without further ado, let's get started. The mutable signs. As I said, we have all these four signs: the air sign of Gemini, Virgo, the earth sign, the fire sign of Sagittarius, and the water mutable sign of Pisces. And our first sign that we're going to be looking at is Gemini. Mutable sign of Gemini corresponds to our Lover's card. This is our Gemini card, which is ruled by Mercury, the planet of the mind, the Magician card. And in these three decans, the first, second, and third decan of Gemini, we have the Eight of Swords, the Nine of Swords, and the Ten of Swords. So as the ruler of Gemini, Mercury, the Magician card, is the planet of the mind. And Gemini rules the third house. The third house of communication, learning, and making connections. We talked about all this when we spoke about the Gemini card, the Lover's card in the Major Arcana video. So Mercury, the Magician, rules speech and communication. And just thinking, all kinds of thinking, including negative thinking. So the process of thought, our perception. Gemini is an air sign, and like all other air signs, it's concerned with the concept of duality. And here the number 2, so Gemini is like the twins. The Roman numeral 2 makes us think of duality. Here in the Lover's card, we talked about the two sides of the two hemispheres of the brain and duality. Discrimination, judgment, and just weighing the two opposite sides of any situation. Same when we looked at Libra and the Justice card. So therefore, decision-making and choice are important in this decan for the Lover's card and for Gemini. So remember, air is quick to change. And Gemini here is a mutable sign. Mutable signs, as we discussed earlier, are flexible and changeable. So here, Gemini being a mutable air sign, it's especially prone to change. And I think this is something important to note here because it refers to this state of impermanence that we will look at in the next 3 cards. And of course, that points to one of their lessons, which is that we always have choice. Mercury is known as the quick planet. It's very fast moving and it rules Quicksilver. So we can draw this metaphor here between Mercury and the mind. Thoughts, how they're shifting and changing, very quick moving all the time. Working with the mind, or the quick moving sign of Gemini, can be challenging depending on who is going to visit these decans. When we look at these 3 cards, we'll see that. And then we can we know from just studying tarot that, and also just looking visually at these three cards, that these are sort of the darker cards in tarot, very, very challenging cards. And this will come up as we talk about the visitors of these next 3 decans. So we're going to start with the first decan of Gemini. So the first decan of Gemini is the 8 of Swords. And we're going to keep the Lover's card here, that's Gemini. The ruler of Gemini, Mercury, that's the 8 of Swords. And our visitor here is Jupiter. Jupiter corresponds to the Wheel of Fortune. So I think the image of this card will start to make a lot of sense if we look at how Jupiter feels in this sign. And especially because Jupiter in this sign, in the sign of Gemini, is very far away from home. So Jupiter rules Sagittarius, and Sagittarius is directly opposite of Gemini. So Jupiter is very, very, very far away from home. It's not really feeling comfortable here. This is a concept known in traditional astrology as detriment. So Jupiter is said to be in detriment in Gemini. Now, I think it's important to mention this here because that brings us to some of the meanings of the 8 of Swords. And not to say that being in detriment is a negative thing. I've talked about essential dignities, the idea of planets being in fall and detriment, debility, exaltation. I've discussed this in a separate video, and there is, by the way, a playlist for tarot and astrology if you didn't already know that, and you can go and just, it's a short video, you can just quickly get a feel for what this means before going further if you aren't comfortable here. But just simply here, I just want to explain that Jupiter basically feels uncomfortable in Gemini. Jupiter is the broad, expansive planet. It likes to see the whole picture. It doesn't like to look at all the little tiny details and get all the information, all the little information that Gemini likes to do. Gemini loves researching, finding, all kinds of things about various topics. It's not known to be very focused. It likes to kind of jump from one place to another. It just loves exploring little things, everything, getting facts and information. And Jupiter is more about the broader picture, about seeing the bigger picture, about the bigger brush strokes, like I said in another video, as opposed to the little tiny details. So it's not, it's not very comfortable here. Now, when a planet is in detriment, so being in a sign opposite from its natural home, its natural ruler, for Jupiter being Sagittarius, then it just can't really be itself very comfortably. This doesn't mean that this planet is weak. And I think a lot of times people misunderstand this idea of detriment, thinking that it's a bad or negative thing. But it just means that it's a little bit challenging. And it means also that this planet can be quite strong. Jupiter in Gemini can be very, very strong. It just might need a little bit of extra help to realize its potentials, its greatness. So here the planet of expansion, Jupiter, feels restricted. It feels bonded. It feels like being in the sign of quick thinking, small talk, social butterfly Gemini. it feels that it's a bit restricted. And Jupiter is the planet of higher thinking, of philosophy, of religion. It's like the prophet of the zodiac. And it's interested in thinking big, higher values, ruling Sagittarius, where it's the home of judges and prophets, philosophers. It just doesn't like jumping from one subject to another very superficially, like Gemini sometimes tends to do, which can also be useful in many ways, depending on what it is, of course. So he's just not very comfortable here, right? So it could be that he's feeling a little anxious, and maybe he's going into negative thinking, and he's thinking of all the things that could possibly go wrong. And that's just one manifestation. It doesn't mean that Jupiter in Gemini is always going to be like this. Not at all. It just could be one lower octave, perhaps, of looking at this placement. Because as I keep saying, and I've said it before, each planet in a sign can give us a whole array of manifestations, of different ways it can express itself energetically. And when we're looking at an image, of course, this is just like one picture, one image. So we're just seeing one glimpse of just one expression of how this planet could potentially create an environment, let's say. And of course, this is just another way to understand how this relates to astrology. And to me, it makes sense. And so I feel like this Jupiter's expansive mind, its expansiveness, is being constricted in this position. And so the Wheel of Fortune, the very benefic Jupiter, just needs a fresh perspective to give it maybe perhaps just a little more confidence, and realizing that it's actually quite strong in this position, in this particular place, that this is not a placement of a weak mind. There's a lot of potential here for a powerful mind that just can free itself from self-imposed limitations and worries, and it can move forward past the seeming obstacles, so it can become the magician. It can harness the magician within the mind. So again, like I just said in the beginning, with air signs, the good thing is that we always have the option to choose. And I'm just going to now read you a paragraph by Paul Quinn from his book, Tarot for Life, because he beautifully puts this. The challenge of swords / air is to make the mind into a garden, like the magicians. So here are the magicians in the garden. Beautiful. Wherein we feel the strength and peace of being richly rooted in the present moment. Cultivating the awareness that our being has more substance than our thoughts frees us from the prison of continuous doubts, resentments, judgments, and projections. As magicians, our trick is to loosen the grip of what William Blake called the mind-forged manacles, otherwise known as normal consciousness. That was beautiful, isn't it? I just love that. The garden that we can create like the magician, and we can feel the strength and the peace of being richly rooted in the present moment, what we call awareness, which is just the essence of this card to me. It's the essence of the Mercury and the mind being in the state of balance and harmony within itself, being at peace. Kind of the reverse, almost like reversing this card. So that's all I'm going to say about this position. And there's a lot. See, like everything I just said, we can just bring that all together, and having this knowledge, having this backbone of astrology to just lean back on sometimes can really enrich our readings. So now I'm going to take Jupiter out, take the 8 of Swords out. We're going to have another visitor here for our 9 of Swords. We're going to have Mars. Mars is our next visitor, the Tower card. So in the second decan of Gemini here, we have a guest who is our Tower card, Mars. And as we've talked about before, Mars is the god of war and destruction, aggression and assertion. That thrust forward, the call for action, is the active energy. And in the Gemini, which is the sign of communication and thoughts, as we said, ruled by Mercury, the planet of the mind, here Mars is placed in the world of mind, thoughts, speech, communication. So the god of war here in Gemini can bring with it this kind of sharp and maybe harshness, and that could lead to, when we are speaking about the mind, it could lead to a sense of anxiety to thoughts, a sense of worry, or just lots of movement in the mind. So imagine like a fiery energy in the mind, in the air. It can bring sometimes negativity. I mean, Mars is known in traditional astrology as a malefic planet. Not that it is always a dark, bad planet, but in Gemini, it can sort of bring a sense of anxiety sometimes when there's a lot of movement in the mind, and we can think of Mars being the fiery planet, being situated in the suit of the mind, in the sign of the mind, Gemini. It can bring a lot of maybe anxiety or attention and worry. So here we see in this image that we clearly see that there is this woman waking up in the middle of the night, having nightmares. So that kind of mind frame where we have a lot of anxiety and worry, overanalyzing, overthinking, all the negative mindsets can manifest, come to the surface here. It's as if the mind is sort of turning against itself. So like the mind is tormenting us from within, that experience of tossing and turning in our bed late in the night, like we see in this card. Here, I'm reminded of what they call in Buddhism psychology as the monkey mind, that survival part of the brain, or the fight, flight, freeze response that kicks in and kicks up the adrenals to make sure we're safe in the face of danger. And Mars rules the adrenals in medical astrology. Mars is that instinctual survival, fight and flight planet. It's that mode of fight or flight. And this can be called as the overactive monkey mind if we use it as a metaphor for what's going on here. I'm going to read you a short line from Corinne Kenner in Tarot and Astrology. She says, in Gemini, Mars doesn't play war games. He plays mind games. Mars doesn't play war games. He plays mind games. So interesting, because it's true. Mars here feels like he's got to always fight for something. And that's potentially that can be a really good thing, a really creative thing. Sometimes it can be self-destructive. And here we see it manifesting as such. There's some symbolism of Mars that can be seen here in this card, just on the bottom of the card. There's bottom of the bed frame. There is a sort of fighting, like a god of, like there's like a little fighting scene happening here. And then there's roses, red roses that are sort of symbolizing passion, that Mars has, the god of war. Yeah, I think these two guys are fencing here. So there's sort of a little fighting action going on down there. So that's all I'm going to say about that. Some cards are just, to me, more self-explanatory. And as you'll see, I'll go maybe in a more at length with some cards more than I will with others. So we're going to move on now to the next card, which is our favorite one, Ten of Swords. That's one that when it comes up, a lot of people go, oh my gosh, what does that mean? So let's look at it astrologically. Who is our visitor here? And we have the Sun in Gemini. So you might be wondering, the Sun is so positive. How can this be? Well, so in the third decan of Gemini, we have Sun in Gemini. Now, when the sun is in any sign, we have the pure energy of that particular sign shining forth. So for example, if we say I'm a Gemini, what does this mean? This implies that the sun in our birth chart is in Gemini, right? So here, the sun is in Gemini, meaning that the sign of Gemini is highlighted. So therefore, all the aspects of Gemini, from its highest to its lowest octave, can manifest here. And as we said, we have one single shot, one single image picture here. So we can only see just one glimpse of many, many, many things that could be manifesting within a sign. So the sun's energy is bringing up an aspect of Gemini here. Strong Gemini energy here. So, like I've said before, sometimes I feel that the image on the card can point to the shadow aspect of a particular planet in a sign. And I guess I could say here that maybe this represents a challenging aspect of the sun in Gemini, because the image, as we see, is rather dark, right? So let's just examine that. Mercury, magician, the ruler of Gemini, as we said, is the planet of the mind, speech and communication, speedy movement, right? It's quick moving. Mercury rules Quicksilver. And Hermes, the magician, he's also known as the magician. He's the messenger of the gods, and he wears his winged sandals to quickly deliver messages to the gods, and sometimes from gods to humans. And that's very much like how the mind works, right? So we think quickly, thoughts come really quickly. And we know that in mindfulness, if any of you have experienced that, watching the stream, the mind stream, so thoughts move really quickly. And sometimes we know that these thoughts can work against us if we don't, or if we're not mindful of them. You know, we can believe our thoughts. So just like the mind and Mercury, when Mercury is challenged in the chart, if it is, for example, in a difficult aspect with another planet, it has the potential or the propensity to fall into the trap of overthinking and overanalyzing. That's what Gemini, Sun in Gemini, can do sometimes. And it can literally, like in this card, think itself to death. And the man portrayed here, stabbed in the back with these swords of the mind, he might be feeling defeated by his own mind. So if we think of the number 10 as representing the cycle of completion and beginning, we can think of this card also representing a cycle of something ending, maybe a way of mindset, a death and rebirth, a way of beginning again, the end of something and the beginning of something. And we see that the sun is coming up here. So there is still hope, you know, even though the scene might look really dark and gloomy, there's perhaps another new way of thinking. What we may perceive to be an ending, there is also a new beginning. When we're too much in our heads, our perceptions are not always true, even if they seem real, because we're not coming from a grounded place and maybe not always in touch with the reality. So we forget that our thoughts are not permanent. And it's like what I said in the beginning. In this suit of air, the suit of the mind, you always have a choice. Things are not permanent. The sun is always rising again. It's always coming up from the horizon. Also, just going back to Gemini here, it's important to remember a mutable air sign, prone to change. So this again gives us a sense of understanding of the impermanence, a sense of impermanence here in this card, as our thoughts are always impermanent. They're always changing, always passing, like clouds in the sky, like the sun is always coming up in the morning. Things are always changing. One of my favorite Ten of Swords cards is from this Steel Wizard Tarot by Pamela Steele. The Ten of Swords here. This is one of my favorite depictions because it really shows this feeling of ending and beginning, like a cycle. if you can see here, there's a crow. There's like a really there's no man here. It's like it's just a skeleton. It's like death, really death. But then that gives me that feeling of the cycle, the birth and rebirth cycle, the end of a cycle and beginning of another. Or in this case, the end of a particular way of thinking, letting go of an old way of thinking. So I think the presence of the sun card really tells me that sense of rebirth, like the sun coming up again. And if we think of the cycle of the seasons, it's quite beautiful because Gemini is going towards Cancer. It's going towards summer solstice in the northern hemisphere. So it's like the sun is really at its bloom, at its height, really glowing, and that connects me to this horizon here where the sun is shining, that presence of the sun. All right, so we're done now with Gemini, and we're going to move on to Virgo. The 3 decans of the mutable sign, mutable earth sign of Virgo. So Virgo corresponds to the Hermit card. And Virgo is ruled by Mercury, which is our Magician card again. We have our Magician Magician ruling the 3 decans of Virgo with the Hermit card. So these two guys are hosting the party. And we're going to have 8, 9, and 10 of Pentacles to look at and explore in the next 3 decans with our visitors in each card. So let's see, this is the backdrop of the next 3 decans. This is what we keep in mind, all of these ideas that I'm going to talk about. So similar to the Hermit card, Virgo is reflective and enjoys solitude and stillness. As we saw in the Major Arcana video, its placement here on the lower half of the zodiac wheel. So we talked about the upper half, the lower half, the first 6 signs, and then the next 6 signs. So on the lower half, we have more of the subjective part of the chart. It's more introverted, and Virgo really loves delving within, reflecting, and arriving at insights, thinking, analyzing. Virgo rules the 6th house of work, health, and service. It's very detail-oriented, analytical, and it's a perfectionist. So keep all of those things in mind about Virgo. See how that relates to these next 3 cards, okay? So now, the note about perfectionism. The concern that Virgo has is not so much with perfectionism itself, but of its need for refining the self. And we talked in great detail in the Major Arcana video about Virgo, how it's the sign of the Virgin. Virgin meaning, its original meaning is self-possessed, and it's named after the Vestal Virgins, who were dedicated to the Roman goddess Vesta. And here is where we get the symbolism of Virgo in terms of dedication, service, and prudence. So here in the next 3 decans of Virgo, we're concerned with issues of prudence, reflection and contemplation, patient planning, and tending to everyday rituals, dedication to work and service, the refinement of skills. So it's important to keep all of these in mind in order to understand the next 3 cards. And I think a lot of what I said, you can already, if you know tarot, kind of relate to the next 3 cards. So let's start with the first decan of Virgo, which is 8 of Pentacles. So our visitor here is the sun, which is great because we just talked about the sun. So we know that when it's in a particular sign, the true essence of that sign is even more enhanced. So everything about Virgo here becomes highlighted and expanded, enhanced, right? And Mercury, as we saw, the Magician, was also the ruler of Gemini. But here he has a slightly different role. So in Gemini, Mercury, he collects information, goes from one thing to another, just gets all the information and facts. And then in Virgo, his job is to put it all together. So it's like the two aspects of the mind: collecting information, getting knowledge, the facts, and then putting in Virgo, compartmentalizing it, putting it in order, organizing that information. And here, Virgo is all about analysis, organization, and putting things together, very detail oriented, like we said. And Mercury has another role here in Virgo in myth. In Virgo, he's also the god of poets and craftsmen. So that's interesting because we can see craftsmanship right in this card, in the Eight of Pentacles. In the first decan of Virgo, there's a huge potential for diligence, craftsmanship, getting the job well done, putting, nose to grindstone, working hard, putting all our efforts into completion of tasks. He's, as we see here in this card, right, in all the images of the Eight of Pentacles that we see in tarot. And here Mercury, the god Hermes, he bestows Virgo the gifts of meticulousness and the ability to actually be able to pay close attention to detail and focus. And Hermes the magician, in his highest octave, gives us the ability to focus attention, like that one-pointedness, focusing all the attention, like the number one also talks about, if you think about numerology, the number one, attention, really just dedicating ourselves to that one thing, narrowing us all to be able to get something done, to be able to focus and get something done. And Virgo is the industrious sign that appreciates a job well done. Virgo is very hardworking. Like we said, it rules the sixth house of work and service. It's the sign of refinement, purity, dedication. And I'm going to read you here again from Corinne Kenner's Tarot and Astrology about this card. She says, the Golden Dawn designers of this card called the Sun in Virgo the Lord of Prudence, because it depicts the virtue of dedication, sound judgment, and appropriate behavior. By working diligently at his craft, the man is also refining his character. The Eight of Pentacles often represents a high-level apprenticeship, the ability to sell one's services, and an opportunity to grow and develop through work and service, and the Sun enhances all those qualities. Isn't that beautiful? Because I said in the beginning, the Sun enhances the qualities of Virgo. So like we said, Virgo rules the sixth house of health, work, and service. And I wanted to sort of draw an analogy between the god Hephaestus, I think that's how you pronounce it, Hephaestus, Hephaestus, who was the husband of Aphrodite. He is also said to reside in the sixth house of Virgo. He was the Olympian god's blacksmith, who forged all the tools that the gods needed, anything from magical ones to mundane ones, and he was prized for his craftsmanship and great talent. But he was very unattractive, and in the myth, his mother abandoned him because she thought he was hideous looking. But later he became renowned for his gifts and unique abilities. So when this card comes up, I feel like it points to finding our own special gifts and talents and using the power of Virgo's dedication to follow through our endeavors and creative projects. I'm going to end it there with the discussion of this card. We're going to the Nine of Pentacles now, which is one of my favorite cards. And that's the Empress visiting here. I always thought that just visually, these two images are sort of similar to me. They're like the Empress feeling of plenty and beauty and nature is seen in this Nine of Pentacles. Do you see that at all? To me, that's mirroring. There's a similarity between these cards, but anyway, let's talk about them. So now we are in the second decan of Virgo. Venus in Virgo. Our Lady the Empress, the tarot goddess of beauty and fertility, is visiting the sign of Virgo here. And as the goddess of beauty, Venus knows how to surround herself with luxury and beauty. Remember also that Venus rules the earth sign of Taurus. That was our second sign in the zodiac after Aries. And Taurus, of course, she loves sensual pleasures and the beauties of nature, which we can see in the Empress card. And here is a symbol of Venus on her little heart shield, I think it is, to her side. She's just leaning back in this beautiful garden. And here, it's like as if she's standing, Venus, to me it seems like it's Venus herself, and she's got some symbols on her dress that look like flowers, but they also look like a little bit like the Venus symbol itself. So to me, it's like she's standing here in the garden, in the home of the wise hermit. She's invited here as if she's here in the garden of the hermit. She's wearing her luxurious gown. And one thing here, though, that she has in common with the hermit is that she is alone. Well, with the exception of being with this little bird and that little snail down there, which we're going to talk about. But surrounded by all this beauty in nature, she is alone in this beautiful garden. Being in this placement has taught Venus some important lessons. We are all going to talk about the concept of fall. Again, another one of the essential dignities that we talked about earlier. Here, Venus is said to be in fall. The terms fall and detriment, of course, come to us from the ancient astrologers. So many modern astrologers just simply don't like to work with these traditional concepts. They find them too negative. However, I feel that a lot of times these terms are just taken at face value, but if we investigate into them more deeply and are open to them, they can give us some really beautiful insights. Personally, I love when I can find other ways of looking at things, other perspectives that I hadn't thought of before. So like I said, I did a short video in this series where I talked about essential dignities. But here, Venus in Virgo is in fall. It's said to be in fall. So like we said, when a planet is in a sign that's directly opposite its home, it's said to be in detriment, like we looked at earlier. So Venus, for example, rules Taurus, as we just said, and the sign opposite Taurus is Scorpio, and Venus is said to be in detriment in Scorpio. She's very far away from home. Now, she rules Taurus. She's in detriment in Scorpio, opposite is home. Now, planets also feel good in some signs, even though it's not their natural home. So Venus is exalted, she's said to be exalted, for example, in Pisces. She's called the morning star here. She's shining. She's really beautiful here in Pisces. So she's exalted in Pisces, but then the sign opposite Pisces is Virgo. So the sign that's opposite its exalted sign is said to be the sign that it's in fall. So it's in fall in Virgo. Please don't get confused by all this. This is just a side note. So if you're just overwhelmed right now, just forget about it. You know, if you're interested, listen and learn if you like to. But if you're just confused, you know, this doesn't mean you're gonna fall behind in everything else in these videos that I'm talking about. This is just a very small little parenthesis, if you will. So she's said to be in fall. And in fall, she's just not so comfortable here. So you can think, the key thing to think about here is that when a planet is in fall, it just feels uncomfortable. it basically has to try harder to feel at home. It's not its natural home. It's not only is it away from home, it's not in detriment, it's far, far, far away from home. In here, it's in fall, it's not opposite its home, but it's in uncommon grounds. It's still not feeling very good, you know? So for example, it's like going over to a friend's house, a friend that you really love, you're really comfortable in their home. That would be like Venus in Pisces. It's not your own home, but it's your best friend's house, and you love their parents, and you just feel so good there. You're comfortable there. You can just go to the fridge, open the fridge, take any food you want. You know, that's like the exaltation. And then fall is like being in someone's home that you don't really know, so you're not comfortable going and opening the fridge and eating the food yourself, you know, but it doesn't mean that the hosts hate you or anything. You know, they're nice to you, they're courteous, but you're just not so comfortable there, so you just have to be on best behavior. Maybe you just have to, you know, put on your best clothes and sit there quietly and just, you know, be nice and smile. You can't just, you know, comfortably wear your pajamas and go to their house and, you know, take pizza from their fridge. Just think about that. It's not feeling totally at home. So let's take this and translate it into what this may mean for us for an Empress in the second decan of Virgo. In the hardworking, dedicated, contemplative sign of Virgo, think about the Hermit card. How does the Empress, the goddess of beauty and plenty and luxury, how does Venus Aphrodite, the goddess of love, feel? How does she feel here? Maybe she needs to put aside her seductive persona. Maybe she needs to get a little serious, pay attention to the details, focus on work and mundane daily rituals of an earthly life. You know, the daily rituals, that's the sixth house, the house of work, service, daily rituals. So maybe she'll find those things a little boring, although they're important. And she just needs to have a little more discipline, have a little more patience. She needs to discipline herself and focus maybe on carrying out the everyday rituals of life one by one, tending to her garden, training her hawk with patience, even if she doesn't really feel like it or finds it boring. So we have the hawk here that's hooded, and I think that's very interesting because I know from having a bird myself and training a wild bird, it's a lot of work, and it really requires commitment and discipline, and birds love having daily routines, doing the same thing every day, habits. They just love that, and I think it takes a lot of discipline to train a bird. And I think that little tiny snail on the bottom, which is very small, and you probably know if you have looked at this card, that little snail is often overlooked because that's like slow moving patience, right? That to me talks about that patience that the Empress needs. A lot of times this card, when it's depicted in tarot decks in general, a lot of times it's not hooded. The bird is not hooded. A lot of times it's just a beautiful, beautiful bird sitting on the shoulder of the lady, and everything seems to be so magnificent, so picture perfect and positive, quote unquote, about this card. But I've talked about this before in another video, and I think that there's a lot more to this card. And I think that thinking about Venus being in fall here talks about that. Doesn't mean it's a bad thing. You know, we don't always have to think that things that are difficult and challenging are bad. You know, sometimes they're necessary for life. You know, in order to get a project finished, we need to have that nose to the grindstone Virgo mentality. So surrounded by all this beauty alone, she's forced to focus on what's important for herself. You know, go within, like the Hermit asks. And being in this placement has taught Venus some very important lessons. I think everything she's gained here, she's gained with hard work and discipline, just as the Hermit has spent many years accumulating spiritual wisdom. And wisdom, of course, comes from practical experiences of life, of making mistakes. And Virgo is a sign that's very afraid of making mistakes. It's very self-critical, it can be. But that's because the deeper essence of Virgo, that idea of perfection, of refining the self, of improving, self-improving. All of those things are important to Virgo. So I think here in this decan, Venus gives us the opportunity to see the potential for all the beauty that can manifest in an earthly sign, Venus being an earth planet, the ruler of Taurus here in Virgo, the earth sign. It can bestow all its gifts if we just put the nose to the grindstone, just like the Eight of Pentacles, and carry through that hard work in order to reach completion. And that's all I'm going to say about this card. Hope you enjoyed that. The Ten of Pentacles is next. And with this we have Mercury. So Magician card here in Virgo. No other visitor but Mercury, the ruler of Virgo himself. So here it's as if Mercury is just really shining. Mercury / Hermes is also the god of prosperity, commerce, and the exchange of goods and services. Mercury rules Virgo, like we know, and it's also said to be exalted in Virgo, meaning that it gets especially more power in this placement, which allows it to bestow all its gifts here in the third decan of Virgo, in the Ten of Pentacles, as we see with this card. There's plenty, sense of completion, family, there's these two little dogs. We see different generations, different age groups. So we saw Mercury was in the Ten of Swords, a little bit prone to the overthinking, over worrying. But here seems that he's showering us with all these gifts. But remember also that this is an earth sign. And the earth, the element of earth being slow and steady, and the element of manifestation, physical manifestation. And then on the other hand, the element of Gemini is air, which is hard to contain and moves quickly. And Mercury is the shapeshifter in Gemini, moves quickly. And here in Virgo, we said he was also the god of poets and craftsmen, putting things together, analysis, refinement. So here we just have a slightly different energy in the earth element. And we know that the suit of the mind, the suit of swords, it tends to be more challenging. Of course, working with the mind, as we all know, is challenging. So here we see just maybe a higher octave of Mercury in Virgo, bestowing us, showering us with all the physical gifts of manifested gifts of the earth. In the 6th house of Virgo, we said we had health, work, and service, and daily rituals, as well as small animals and pets. And I think that's really interesting. Small animals and pets belong to the 6th house. And here we have 2 dogs, right, in this Ten of Pentacles. I relate that to the 6th house because it is the house of pets. So besides ruling the 6th house, Mercury, we said, rules the 3rd house, belonging to Gemini. We looked at that earlier, which is the house of communication. And it's also the house of siblings. So here we have family, sometimes the idea of siblings, just generations. The imagery, in the imagery of the Ten of Pentacles, we are usually seeing siblings and family, dogs, and we see this old man, which I find interesting because to me, it represents the old man in the Hermit card, right? It sort of mirrors that. I see in this Ten of Pentacles image a lot of the symbolism of Virgo mirrored in there. The wisdom gained from the experience of living a full life, having completed the various cycles of life, so different stages of life, by having gone through the processes of initiation represented by the different stages of physical experience of being a human on Earth, being an earthy sign, the Virgo. And to me, that's all about that, passing that on to the next generations. One card that I love, and really, to me, describe this idea of legacy is from the Spiral Tarot, the image of 10 of Pentacles, the Spiral Tarot. I love this deck, by the way. It's just a classic. It's one of my favorite decks. And when I first saw this image, right away I thought family legacy, just legacy being passed down through the cycles of life. And here's that spiral for the Spiral Tarot, the spiral of life. Now I want to read you a quote by Anthony Lewis in his book, The Journey of the Tarot Fool Around the Zodiac. He says, Mercury as the Magician card emphasizes the need to utilize our skills, knowledge, and self-confidence to make things happen in our lives. Virgo, the old hermit, possesses the wisdom to have amassed a legacy that will be available to the next generation. So I thought that's beautiful how it ties into the legacy that passes on through the generations, starting with the old man here. We see the hermit, and then the siblings and family, and then the pets, the love that and attention that we give to the pets, and all the hard work that we did. The whole suit of Pentacles is like culminated here in the 10 of Pentacles. So I've decided to end this video here before discussing the next two signs, Pisces and Sagittarius, because I realized that I've gone a little bit over my limit and I don't want this video to be like 2 hours long. So I'm going to end it here, and that will give you guys a chance to review this material, to ask me any questions if you have any. Tell me what your thoughts are. Just write in the comment section what you thought about this, and then I'll give you some time to digest all this. And then I'll continue the next video where I talk about the next 4 or the next 6 cards and the next 2 signs, Pisces and Sagittarius. That will be the suit of Wands and the suit of Cups, water and fire. And that won't be my last video. I do want to continue on and talk about the court cards as well. So the series is not over. It's an ongoing series, and there's always going to be ideas that I'm going to come up with here and there to add onto it. So that's all for today. Thank you so much for listening. If you've been listening until now, thank you so much for your willingness to learn with me and to share with me. And I'm just so grateful to have this opportunity to share with you on this platform. Please let me know if you have any questions, if you have any suggestions, ideas, things you would like to explore more about tarot and astrology. I'm open to that. And I'm sending you, as always, lots of love and many, many blessings, everybody. Thank you for being here. Mwah. Kisses and love. Bye. Take care.